talking about what a tech-integrated classroom really is, a brief overview. So basically, we're looking at how using technology can enhance a lesson and meet the needs of diverse learners in the classroom. Technology can help students in 4 ways. Basically, it allows for really active engagement. It allows for the opportunity for the students to interact and participate in groups much more readily. There is also frequent interaction and feedback, whether it's peer-to-peer or student-to-teacher. So let's go ahead and talk about how technology can be used in the classroom with thinking about some very basic things before you dive into lesson design. So the first thing I want to talk about was the SAMR model. And also to reiterate that technology integration is a process, and while some people might be ready to jump into the deep end, not everybody is. So it's okay if you work your way up. So within the SAMR model, like all things in education, they have created a nice little acronym for you. So the S stands for substitution, basically where the tech acts as a direct substitute for something you would have done previously. So for example, let's say instead of a math teacher giving a printed out copy of a math worksheet, they would have made a digital copy of that and given it to the students to work on a piece of technology. So if you're in a school like I am where we have just rolled out one-to-one iPads, that could be an option. And that is the very basic level of the SAMR model, where you're just substituting the tech as a direct substitution for what you would have done. And that's okay. And remember, it is a process, so you have to kind of figure out where you are feeling the most comfortable. The next step is augmentation, where the tech acts as a direct tool or a substitute with a little bit of functional improvement. So instead of keeping a spiral journal, you're having the kids use an app or something, or maybe even do a blog online. So it's kind of substituting what you've already would have done, but in a slightly different augmented way. Again, these are ways that you're just kind of enhancing the classroom, not necessarily redefining it. So when you move above the line, you're going to start looking at ways to transform your classroom, both in the use of the technology, but also in the tasks that you're asking the students to do. So the next one that you're looking at above the line is modification, where you're actually looking at a significant task redesign. So instead of having the students use I'm a language arts teacher, so let's say we move from a direct substitution of a spiral-bound journal where they're doing a lot of journal writes to using the app Notability, for example, and they're doing all of their journal writes in the app Notability. That's a direct substitution. But maybe you move into the augmentation stage where you're having them do or create a blog. Well, what about if you modify that completely and you have them build their own website where they are including some of the journal rights and things, but maybe they're adding additional content, web videos, pictures, etc., making it more interactive. That tends to lean more towards the modification piece. Then you're also looking at redefine. Now, we're asking you to start thinking about ways to try and teach above the line. That's kind of the motto that goes along with the SAMR model. How can you move towards modification and then eventually to redefinition? And redefinition is pretty exciting because that's basically kind of turning the classroom on its head and getting you to a place where you can do things that you previously thought were completely impossible. So having a class design an app that will work at your school to solve a specific problem that you guys are having, or something like that. I think what's important for us to realize is that our students are functioning at a completely different level than they've ever been before. That they not only are learning how to use technology on a regular daily basis, but we also need to start getting them to think about using technology in an academic setting, in an academic way, which they're not quite used to yet. The students have access to ever-expanding stores of information, but just handing them a device, giving them access isn't going to get you the gains, the academic gains that you are expecting. There has to be something else involved here. So it's not just, here you go, have at it. There has to be a little bit more going on. So that leads me to talking about the TPACK model. Now this is interesting because it's showing kind of a convergence of three pretty valuable things as far as best practices for teaching. So the TPACK model is asking that you think about having a really good base in content knowledge, a great base in your pedagogy, as well as a basic understanding or a good base in technology. That in order to really implement technology in the classroom and to be able to teach above the line, you've got to have these three things solid and in place. And again, it's important to remember not only is it a process, but every tech integration is unique based on the teacher, the population of the school, the students. Each classroom is going to be different. There isn't one finite solution that can be applied to all teachers. So it is really important that you take a look at your data, you take a look at what's going to work the best for your school, as well as what technology is going to be working best for your school and what access the kids actually have. There's a lot going on. So again, it's a process. Okay, so also in consideration, not just as teachers, but also in thinking about the students themselves, because giving them access to these online environments, these kids have been using social media for longer than you actually might think is possible, but they've been functioning in a technology world in an entertainment capacity. It's never really necessarily been in an academic setting, and this is a very valuable thing that we need to think about. How can we make sure that they are prepared and ready to do the things that we want them to do without acting the way that they have previously when they're using the technology for their entertainment? So one thing I would really stress is to think about, before even allowing them access to an online environment, to think about doing some lessons on digital citizenship, which is basically the main idea of teaching students how to act and conduct themselves online. It's also important to talk about digital footprints, especially when teaching with younger grades. They need to be aware that everything they put online, once it's out there, it's out there. There's no pulling it back. And the more you put out there that's attached to you, the bigger your footprint grows. Cyberbullying is also a major issue, especially when you think about getting technology even more into the hands of the kids. They need to be aware of how, again, going back to digital citizenship, how their words and actions and pictures and whatever else they're putting online can affect others. It's also important to talk about digital addiction and to think within your school and community about unplugged times. I know in my school, again, we are a one-to-one iPad school, that we are cognizant of unplugged time and trying to give the kids lots of time away from their device. Even though we're trying to implement the technology and become a more paperless school, it is something to think about, that digital addiction piece. So where can you find some already created content on these things? Well, Sophia has quite a few great tutorials. I would also point you in the direction of Common Sense Media. They've got a lot of lesson plans and great, step-by-step guides, and they're a nonprofit organization that devotes a lot of time and energy into creating pieces specifically for the use of media in education and at home, actually. And YouTube has also put together quite a bit of tutorials and things on these four concepts up above. But I would kind of go through and vet them, especially considering your population of students, depending on what you think is appropriate for your kids. Okay. Also, it's really important for us to understand that with the interactive nature of technology, shown by the use of different web-based 2.0 tools, as well as apps, depending on what access you have, there's a lot of new opportunities for students to learn and allow them to do different tasks and get feedback on that, build new knowledge. It's an ongoing process and cycle, which is really exciting. Now, the Bloom's taxonomy has recently been updated, and they've gone through and kind of changed some of the nouns to verbs and renamed some completely and moved them around a little bit. So it is important to kind of refamiliarize yourself with the new revised Bloom's taxonomy. We're going to take a closer look here at a few things. Basically, the key to using technology in the classroom is to not only kind of move the onus to the students as far as, allowing them more personalized education and learning environments, but also to get them to start creating their own content to show their knowledge of the different standards that you're working on. Some websites and apps can also be really helpful to allow students to experiment. I know one of the big concepts right now that's being tossed around and talked about is the idea of failure, that it's okay to try something and for it to not work, but then to learn from your mistakes and to keep going. The very, essence of engineering and design, which is important in the whole STEM movement, right? So as we take a closer look at some of the higher order thinking skills for Bloom's, you'll see that creating has replaced evaluating up at the top, where this idea, like I just said, trying to get the students to create their own content should be your eventual goal as far as kind of that redefinition of what your classroom tasks and activities will be. Now, the other thing to think about too, the Department of Education in 2010 kind of outlined a vision where they wanted technology to, create an engaging, relevant, personalized learning environment for students. And this is very different from the traditional classrooms. Like I said, we're kind of requiring the onus to be shifted from the teacher at the front, sage on the stage mentality, to really student-centered, and the teachers becoming collaborators and coaches through the learning process for the student. So they're also asking that teachers become more of a connected, use of connected teaching, basically, where you are looking for resources and expertise to constantly improve your teaching instruction and practices, but then also that you are becoming more familiar with technology and how it works with the kids themselves. So something to just be kind of aware of, that it is something kind of moving. So what are our next steps? So if you can, try to think of a lesson that you can use that will integrate technology in some way. Use the technology when it's appropriate. Remember, it's not the end-all be-all. It should just be used to engage and enhance the lesson at first. But if you feel like you can go a little bit farther than that, think about reaching towards that level where you're teaching above the line. How can you get the students to start creating their own content? How can you start modifying the tasks so that the students are using the technology in a way that allows them to create? And you also need to start thinking about how to choose the right technology tools, because it depends on whether or not you're looking at something web-based or you're looking at using an app. Do you have access to a computer lab or a laptop carts, or do you have access to iPads or tablets at your school? Some web-based programs that you might want to use might not work as well on the tablets that you have access to. So testing everything out ahead of time, really kind of understanding what could go wrong and having a backup plan are all a part of lesson design and tech integration. So we'll continue working on, how to use Sophia to build groups and to navigate and to kind of get all of your ducks in one place and send your students to that one specific place. We'll also be working on building and sharing out content and using data, watching as your kids access and use the technology and using that data to help guide your instruction. So hopefully we'll see you for the next round, and this was hopefully informative. Thanks, guys.